So when you look at an issue of this magnitude, first thing is like you obviously get a shock. But then when you think about it deeper, and for me at least as an artist, what's really important is the core human values to present them so that people can connect with people versus professions and past and all those things. So I really wanted to present a human story, and I wanted to talk about the actual issue according to me, which is a stigma and the patriarchy. So those are the two things that I tackled with most. And I decided to present them in a fantastical mythological world so that it is easy for children to like the story, to enjoy the story, and to read it all the way through, versus presenting hard hitting facts. So it really lives in the world of storytelling and myth and, all of these creative aspects that wherein we've created the villain as a demon, not as a human being.
And as you point out, you're targeting children. It's a young audience. How does this then reach the people who are running these terrible rackets?
Unfortunately, that's the hard one. I don't know how to reach those people, and I don't know if any of us know that. My hope is that we start with the younger generation, and hopefully within a generation or two, these kind of things just don't happen because we're raising our children correctly. People who've already grown up, people have already started to take the wrong path. It's very hard to correct them. And it's very hard to reach the traffickers with a comic book. I don't know if they would ever even be reading it. But we can raise awareness. If people are aware, traffickers don't just traffic in the blind, in the dark always. You can see the things happening. They go through the same streets. They use the same kind of, transport. There have been stories of air hostesses intervening when they thought somebody was being trafficked, hotel staff intervening and reporting the police that they were thinking that something was going on in a specific room. So I feel like awareness is key. If children are also aware, they know what they're dealing with, it's important to raise awareness, and maybe that's how we deal with the traffickers.
So you're thinking more of a generational change, because when you look at the patriarchy that you described there, it's so entrenched in many cultures.
Mm-hmm. Mine too. It is like an invisible fabric. I like to call it an invisible fabric. It's in our blood, and we have to really stop it now before it passes through our blood. I find myself dealing with patriarchy a lot because I grew up with patriarchy around me. So even though I fought it and I came out of it, it still is within me. Like I find myself following gender-specific roles in my own household. I find myself apologizing to my husband when he has to take care of my daughter when I travel. Yeah. And that is patriarchy. And I hope that my daughter doesn't have to face any of these things. So yes, my approach is very generational.
Indeed. Denormalising the industry is another approach in a way to not have the stigma associated with women who get caught up in it and might eventually be able to leave it.
Yeah, and more than normalizing, I just think like we don't look at a doctor just as a doctor. We don't look at a lawyer just as a lawyer. We don't always refer to them as their profession. But unfortunately, when it comes to sex industry and when it comes to prostitutes or trafficking victims who've been rescued, that just becomes their identity. That starts to define them. And that's a huge problem. When they come out, they need to find a social standing. They need to be able to walk with us. And do we allow them to do that? I don't think so.
This, of course, is the third in the series of these comic books. We've seen one that tackled rape, another that tackled acid attacks. What sort of success do you think the first two had?
The engagement, and I think which is the key thing that Ram Devaneni, who's the creator of the comic book, was going after. He's taken the comic book to universities and started the engagement with the youth, which is where I think our power lies. And it's been great. People have come forward, shared their stories, especially with the acid attack book, which was the second chapter. Actual acid attack victims have stood with the book and stood with Priya. So Priya is becoming a voice for women in India, but generally women everywhere in the world. It's the hidden voice that doesn't really get expression. And that's what Priya is giving expression to, which is wonderful. And our true hope is that with this book, more and more men and women come ahead with their stories, Hashtag Me Too is one thing, but breaking silence is a huge thing for people from smaller places. And we're hoping that that starts to happen with this book.
And you talked about the mythological creatures that you used. Is that a way to separate it, as you say, from the humans, taking out the blame?
Well, I'm very careful in my work to not blame or villainize people or things, because I think that then just points fingers, and that's a problem in itself then. But what I really wanted to do was create a story that is larger than life And I grew up with, I joke about this, like in the West, people grow up with the stories of mermaids, especially girls. But I
Yes.
grew up with the stories of Nagins and Nags, which are like half snake, half human creatures. And I was really fascinated by them. And so I wanted to bring those things into the book and create a book that gave expression to more than just human aspect of humanity. So I created a monster that is basically a lava monster that represents the evil. So I'm not shying away from what is negative, what is bad, and what's evil. I'm just giving it a different form. Instead of blaming a person or a human, I'm bringing it as evil energy, which is like the false sense of masculinity, power, greed, lust. And we created that whole energy as a monster.
We wish you great success with the books. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope you get to read the book.